All right, now, if you have a Bible and you want to get ready, this is where we're going, Matthew 16. And it looks like we're going to get to the very end of it by those numbers, but we're not. Okay, this is part one of these numbers. Okay, and the reason is you got to know the background. If you miss that, you're going to miss the meaning of everything in there, and it's going to be a while learning it because there's a lot that we can learn about the background. Now, last week, you may remember, we left Yeshua and his Talmudim on the shores of the big lake, Lake Galilee, right? And what was going on there is he was warning them about the leaven. Remember? Okay, the leaven of what? Well, the leaven of the religious leaders. The leaders who led the synagogue, as well as the leaders who led the temple. He was warning them about their leaven. And do you remember what leaven meant? Okay, it meant their leadership. It wasn't only, we looked at the very end, we learned that word, it was used in that day in Judaism not only to mean teaching, but leadership. Okay, which is more than teaching. It was basically their lives and the way that they lived their lives. He was like, don't look at their lives because they're not living Torah, right? Okay, now that lake, by the way, there's kind of the background of where we have been since Matthew 1. All right, and there's, see my little laser right there? Top of that body of water, that lake, there's Capernaum where everything began, all right? And there's a trip down to Judea, which is going to be later. But there he is traveling all around the lake, and we already watched him go up there. Remember Tyre? Remember that island that is a rock out in the ocean up there, and then comes back down, okay, and then back around, and then last week he's on the water, crossing the water, and tonight they are going to head way up north, okay? Now, this reading in Matthew is one of the most debated readings in all of the Bible. Okay, there are arguments about what it means. There are whole denominations, there are whole movements that have split over the meaning of. This is where Peter makes the exclamation, "You are the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Okay, that's in this chapter. Then you have Yeshua saying, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." And as a lot of you know, how many of you were raised Catholic? Any of you in there? All right. Well, as you know, in your background, there was this belief, all right, that I don't believe is the right belief, but it's there anyway. The belief is that Jesus' words about Peter are proof that he was the first pope. Okay? And interesting, both Catholics and non-Catholics, who mainly are known as Protestants, and you know where they got that name, right? You know what that name means? Because they were protesting against the Catholics. Okay, that's another lesson for another night. But they trace the beginning of the church to this statement of Jesus, Yeshua. And I think they're both wrong. Okay, and we'll learn about that later. Maybe we won't get there tonight, but we'll learn about that later. So now you know where we're going, and now you're going to need to know literally where we're going, because it begins when Yeshua came into the territory around Caesarea Philippi. Okay? Now, not always, but usually where something happens is just as important as what happens. Okay? Sometimes we don't realize that when we're reading the Bible. Sometimes they're just words and we have, all right, well, Jesus, Yeshua, now he's up north and now he's over here and now, but there's a lot of meaning behind where all of this happens that we're going to look at tonight. And there's another map. Okay? So this area, this city up there that we just read about, Caesarea Philippi, which by the way is a Roman name. Okay? Caesarea means what? Caesar, the emperor. All right? But this is a renamed area. Sea of Galilee is way down here. There's the Jordan River. There's another lake right there. I can't remember the name of it. But up to the right, there's the tribe of Dan and their area, and there's this area, there's also the name Banias. Banias is the ancient name for where they are. This is about 30 miles beyond where the Sea of Galilee is, and you'll notice this region is at the foot of a mountain. What mountain? Can you read that? Mount Hermon, all right, is the name of that mountain, otherwise known as Hermon. But in Hebrew, it's Hermon. All right? This area in Israel in the day, and even now, had and has an unusually beautiful, lush setting around it that is full of life, and it is the area where the source of the Jordan River is. Okay? In the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, where you read all about Banias, you read about it not only as Banias, but as the land of Bashan. Okay, you remember that? All right. There was a king of Bashan. Do you remember what his name was? He has a really interesting name. Og. Okay? King Og. He was king in this region right there around Mount Hermon and Banias. All right? Now, you may remember that Og was not like me at all. Okay? Og was a giant that I believe stood almost 10 feet tall. Okay? And you may remember when Israel finally went into the land under Joshua that they were told by Yehovah, by God, the God of mercy, the God of grace, the God of Hesed, the God of the Bible, the God of Genesis, and the God of Yeshua, they were told by Joshua that there were groups in the land where they were going that God wanted to wipe them out. All of them. Don't leave any of them alive. Kill everybody, men, women, children, dogs, everybody and everything in there. You're going to wipe them out. People don't like that. Okay? They wonder, well, what kind of God would command all of these people to be wiped out by Israel, by his own people? And they use that as a reason to argue against God. And Christians even use that as a reason that why the God of the Old Testament is the big, bad, mean God, but the God of Jesus is nice and sweet and gracious. Never mind that Jesus, Yeshua, looked at the religious leaders and called them a bunch of snakes. all right, and took out a whip and drove them out of the temple. Mr. Nice Guy. Okay? But something else is going on here. Now, you need to remember, and you might not even know this, okay? It's very important that you note that it was not all groups that were in the land that Israel was to wipe out. Okay? They weren't to wipe out all of the Canaanites, not all of them. There were groups that they were to wipe out all the way, but most of the groups that lived there, what were they to do? They were to drive them out of the land. Okay? There's a big difference in killing everybody and driving them out of the land. These groups that were to be wiped out were said, you read in the book of Joshua, that they were devoted to destruction. Another English Bible uses the words under the ban. They were under the ban, and they were to be terminated. Okay? One example is Jericho. So we read this in Joshua, that the city will be under the ban, and all that is in it belongs to Yehovah. Meaning it's all got to go. Okay? He has made a boundary. He has deemed this as under the ban. It all belongs to him, and it's all going to get wiped out. That's his goal. The word, or the words under the ban in Hebrew, is one word. It's the word haram, and it means utterly destroy and exterminate. Why? Well, they were evil, but so are you. Not every day. Some days you have evil that's going on. Okay. You need to remember that we're looking at ancient people, and we're looking at the view of the ancients, their view of the world, and their view of Genesis, and what it was like in those days. And in the ancient Hebrew worldview, the beings living in areas under haram, meaning that were to be wiped out, were mixed offspring of human and the Nephilim that are mentioned in Genesis 6. Do you remember those guys? You read in Genesis that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the ancient heroes, the men of renown. Now, you can look at those verses and you can interpret them a lot of ways. All right? What I'm interested in is the way that the ancient Jewish Hebrew people believed about this. How did they interpret this idea? Okay? The Jewish tradition in other books, like the books of Enoch, for example, they say that these Nephilim were giants. Okay? And very interesting, the word Nephal in Hebrew means fall. Okay? So the Nephilim are fallen ones. Fallen from where? Okay? So if you're an ancient Hebrew, they're fallen from heaven, because the word sons of God is sons of Elohim. Now that's a whole other lesson right there with the idea of Elohim. Sometimes in the Bible, Elohim is Yehovah. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the word Elohim is in reference to other gods. Okay, like the Elohim of Egypt, the gods of Egypt, all right? Now, wherever these beings were found that had mixed bloodlines, and notice in Genesis, very interesting, the flood you would have thought would have handled all the Nephilim, but it didn't. Because you read here in Genesis that the Nephilim were on the earth in that day and afterwards. And Israel is going to be dealing with them all the way through the Tanakh. Okay? That's interesting, isn't it? One of these groups of the giant Nephilim clans were known as the Anakim. Sounds like Star Wars, doesn't it? The Anakim. We're going to meet them again in a minute. Okay, one of, if not the main center of where these beings dwelt was, guess where? Banias. Okay? And by the way, the word Bashan, which is another word for the region, means the place of the serpent. And this mountain, Mount Hermon, is right there. Mount Hermon in Hebrew, okay? Just let me ask, do you remember the word that means exterminate? Do you remember what that word is in Hebrew? Haram. Haram. Mount Hermon in Hebrew is Harmon, and the root word is the exact same word as haram, utterly destroy. Something's going on this mountain. There's something going on in this area. And what's more, in Jewish writings like the books of Egypt, Mount Hermon is the very place where the Elohim of God that were with the Nephilim, it's the very place that they launched their rebellion against Yehovah. Okay? So that means there are divine beings, Nephilim. They are rebelling against God, against Yehovah, and in Jewish literature, the center of this rebellion and where it began is right there at Mount Hermon, which is right where Yeshua and his disciples are headed like a bee. Very interesting. Okay, now, the ancient Canaanites built temples to Baal at Banias, okay? And later the Greeks and the Romans built sanctuaries there because it was where they believed the god named Pan lived, all right? As a matter of fact, there is on that mountain a cave. Has anybody ever been there? You remember that? Okay, and yeah, we'll look at that in a second. In Joshua, we read that under Joshua, by the way, they wiped out a lot of the bad guys. However, in Joshua 11, you read there were no Anakim left in the land of the sons of Israel. Only in Gaza and Gath and Ashdod some remained. So they got rid of a lot of the giants, but they didn't get rid of all of them, okay? There were those that were left, and they were in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Anybody know where that is? That's the land of the what? Philistines, a la Goliath, who we meet later in the Tanakh that was only 9'9". So maybe Og looked down on Goliath a little bit. I don't know. Okay, but what you learn by that is you learn that this process of getting rid of the Elohim, the Nephilim, was ongoing, and it was in David's day. Okay? It wasn't only in Joshua's day, it wasn't only in Noah's day and Moses' day, it was in David's day as well. Okay, back to Banias, and where the Romans built their sanctuaries, and where they believed that God Pan dwelt. And here's the cave right there. All right? By the way, this place has another name. The Gates of Hades. Now, in this cave, there was what they believed to be a bottomless pit, okay, with an unlimited quantity of water, which made the pagans marvel, and them and their writings was known as the gate of the underworld. Okay? It was in this area of Bashan that the first king of divided Israel, okay, Jeroboam. Remember David and then Solomon, and then it divided, and Jeroboam went to the north. It was in this very region where he led Israel into idolatry. Okay? This was where the Greeks and the Romans, as I already said, worshiped the god Pan, and there was the cave. By the way, if you have a cave and it's the god Pan, what does that make it? A pan cave. Da, da, da. Keep you awake. Keep you awake with all of this ancient history. All right? Now, this god, Pan, was known in Greek writings as the giver of revelations. All right? And interesting, archaeologists have found up to now more than 20 pagan temples in this area around Mount Hermon. So you're getting it. In the mind of the ancient Israelites, Banias and Mount Hermon were ground zero in a planet-wide battle between the forces of Yehovah and other gods. And Yeshua and his disciples are heading there. And they're heading there for a reason. Okay? So now, let's go back and read. When Yeshua came into the territory around Caesarea Philippi, he asked his Talmudim, "Who are people saying the Son of Man is?" They said, "Well, some say John the Immerser, and others Eliyahu or Elijah. Still others, Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah or one of the prophets." Yeshua wants to know, what are people saying about me? Okay? And the answers, they give him the answers. Disciples give him the answer because they've heard. It's interesting how maybe Yeshua hasn't heard, but the disciples have heard. You know, people will talk to the one that isn't the leader, but not the leader. Sometimes. So, sometimes I hear things and I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me? Oh, yeah. Like, yeah, I'm the big bad guy. Okay? So it was that people were saying either, number one, you're John the Baptist back from the dead. Okay? Now, we already know from what we've read in Matthew that Herod believed that. Remember? Back in Matthew 14, it says, around that time, Herod, the regional governor, heard of the fame of Yeshua and said to his attendants, "This must be John the Baptist, Yochanan the Immerser. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him." Secondly, people were saying, "You're Elijah." Okay? In other words, Elijah coming back from the dead in whatever way. And where did they get that idea? Well, they got that idea out of Malachi. Because at the end of Malachi, in the Tanakh, he writes that, "Look, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord of Adonai. Okay? Now, interestingly, even to this day, okay, at a Jewish Seder, there is a cup there for Elijah. We have done that. Okay, and the reason it's there is, maybe this is the year that Elijah will return and the Messiah will come. Right? So, you have all of that. So, the disciples are like, well, they think you're John the Baptist, some of them think you're Elijah, or some of them think maybe you're Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Now, that wasn't unusual because Yeshua was known as a prophet. All right? But what I learned from all of this is there's a lot of what we might call superstition going on. There's a lot of beliefs and ideas and pagan ideas mixed with Torah and just all of this going on there in the people of Israel. So when Yeshua asks, who do they think that I am? He gets all of these answers. Okay? So, we have the idea sometimes because we box everything up that it's like in the ancient world, in the days of Jesus, there were the Jews and they were all like this. No, they were all like us. They were divided into different groups with different beliefs, and some of them were more radical than others, and you had a right wing and you had a left wing, and they fought together. And what's fascinating about what's happening in Matthew is the right wing and the left wing are getting together to do away with Yeshua. Can you imagine that? Yeah. Can you imagine leftist Democrats getting together with right-wing Republicans in order to do whatever? In our world, that's hard to imagine right now. That's what it was like in the days of Yeshua. So when you read about the Pharisees and the Sadducees working together, think of it like that. Okay? It was a big deal. Then Yeshua, it's interesting because he doesn't look at them and go, no, I'm not any of those guys. Okay? He doesn't deny or affirm anything. He just asks, but you, who do you say that I am? There's a good Baptist message right there. Right? Right. Who do you say that I am? Here's what's fascinating. Up to now, Yeshua has said and demonstrated that he's a number of different things in Matthew. Now, remember, okay, we are the readers of Matthew. We know more than the people who are in the narrative of Matthew. Got it? Because in the beginning of Matthew, we read this. This is the genealogy of Yeshua, the what? The Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. So right at the get-go, Matthew wanted his readers to know that Yeshua is the Messiah. We know that because we read it. Those disciples on Mount Hermon didn't know it. Okay? So when Peter gives that answer, it's like that hasn't happened yet. Okay? We're more than halfway through. We're almost on our way to Jerusalem where Yeshua is going to die. Because the last section of Matthew is squeezed into like a couple of weeks, not that long, where what we've read up to now is almost a year's worth. Okay? So, what we have learned and what the disciples knew was that Yeshua is a rabbi. In Matthew 8, we learned that he was a Torah teacher and a rabbi, because another Torah teacher asked, Rabbi, I will follow you wherever you go. Okay? We learned that he's son of David. All right? The crowds were amazed, and they asked, this couldn't be the son of David, could it? And then we learned that he was a prophet. Remember, right at the beginning of his ministry, his words were, "Turn from your sins to God. The kingdom of heaven is near or at hand." Right? Those were the words of a prophet. He wasn't the first one to utter those words. Even in the gospel, who was? John the Baptist. Exact same words. By the way, you read these words, repent and turn to God, the kingdom of heaven is near, and then you read, believe the good news. What is the good news? What? The kingdom of heaven is near. That's the good news. Well, I thought the good news was Jesus died. No, that's not the good news. Not according to Jesus. In Yeshua's words, the good news is the kingdom of heaven is near. In other words, it has drawn near. In me, something is happening, and there's going to be a renewal of the kingdom, and I'm here, and it's here, so let's get her done, right? Just believe, follow me, okay? He's a miracle worker. He went all over the Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. It's very interesting. Not the good news of the death of Jesus. We'll get there, okay? When we get to the cross, we'll get there, all right? And he was, healing people from every kind of disease and sickness. We've even learned that he was Son of God. Remember when he was on the boat and Peter walked on the water, and after it was over, the men in the boat fell down before him and they exclaimed, "You really are God's Son." Okay? But the bottom line is, up until now, they don't know exactly who he is. They don't know he's the Messiah. So now Peter speaks up. That's not unimaginable if you know him, right? Because you've met the guy. The guy's he's the loud one and the blunt one, and the one who has the guts. Okay. I have read about the early Talmudim of Jesus, and most believe that most of them were teenagers, except Peter, who was a little bit older and would have been in his early 20s, which is one of the reasons he was the leader of the bunch. All right? So he speaks up. It says this: "You are the Mashiach, the Son of the living God." Shimon Bar Yochanan, Yeshua said to him, "How blessed are you, for no human being revealed this to you. No, it was my Father in heaven." Now, we need to ask what I always ask. What did he mean? What did Peter mean when he said, "You are the Messiah"? In other words, what was in his mind about what that means? Okay? Maybe you'll get it when we look at the background real quick here. The word Messiah means anointed one. It is the word mashach, which means smear with oil. Okay? The word was first used in the Tanakh when Jacob laid his head down on a rock and had a dream about a ladder that went into the heavens, and there were heavenly beings, angels, going up and down on the ladder. Remember that? Jacob's ladder. Okay? And then when he woke up, he heard God speak to him. Okay? And he woke up and he said, "God, Elohim, is in this place, and I didn't even know it." Which lets you know something else on a little rabbi trail. Can I take a little rabbi trail? Jacob probably had no idea about the omnipresence of God. In Jacob's mind, God lived there. Bethel, where he met him at the rock. That was the way of the ancient mind. Okay? Later in the Tanakh, we learn that, God is not limited to one location. But in Jacob's mind, this is where God lives. So what did he do? He took oil and mashach, the rock, okay, poured it over the rock. And then he heard the voice of God again. And the voice of God said this, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a memorial stone and where you made a vow to me. That was later on in Jacob's life. So why would God need to look at Jacob and go, by the way, I'm the God you met at Bethel? Wow, this God travels. Jacob is thinking in his mind, right? Okay. Now, in Israel, Yehovah instructed that there would be leaders. These leaders would be smeared with oil in order to show that they were chosen by God himself for specific reasons. This began with the anointing of Aaron and his sons, the priests of Israel. Later, kings like David and others would be anointed, all right? All of these in Israel were thought of as messiahs. Did you know that? Okay? So there's a lot of messianic figures in the Tanakh. They're kings and prophets and leaders in Israel. Okay? Now, as you remember, Israel's history is filled with rebellion. Their ongoing rebellion against Yehovah. And it's filled with the consequences of their rebellion, which usually manifested in them being oppressed by other nations. Okay? And when we get to the days of Yeshua, what was left of Israel, the Jewish people, were under the thumb of Rome. Has anybody heard of Avi ben Mordecai? Okay, he's a writer and he's a teacher. I think he even has a TV program on God TV or something like that. Anyway, he wrote a book. The name of the book is Messiah. It's actually got 3 volumes. But in volume 1, he writes this. Since ancient times, Jewish people from all walks of life have looked with great expectation for a coming messianic king, one who would explain the Mosaic Torah to Israel, free the people from the yoke of the hated oppressor, and establish peace and justice in the world. By the days of Yeshua, many Jews believed that there would be more than one Messiah. Okay? They believed that there would be one known as the Messiah, son of Joseph, who would be a servant figure. But there would be one that's the son of David, who would be the ruling king figure. This is the one they were waiting for. This is the one they believed they needed, Messiah, son of David. Okay, why? Because that Messiah was going to kick the Romans out in their mind. So what we need to realize is when Peter looks at Yeshua and says, "You are the Mashiach, the Son of the living God," he got the words right. But, as we'll find out next week, okay, he was a first century Jew. And as you'll see, his expectations were no different from any of his Jewish brothers who were around him. These expectations were molded more by their traditions than they were by Torah. Okay? When Peter thought of Yeshua as Messiah, he would have totally expected that Yeshua was going to form an army and confront Rome and win and install himself as the king of a reborn Israel. Okay? Not, you are the one who's going to die. Not by any means was that in Peter's mind, which you already know, because you already know what is going to happen next. But you'll learn more about it next week. Okay? Now, all of this leads me to ask, and you don't have to answer this. This is, you can just think about it. Who is Yeshua to you? Are we looking for his true identity according to the Bible and its background and its context? Or are we content to allow tradition and our own lenses to identify who he is? See, we live in a world where the answer to everything is, well, that's not what it means to me. Okay? Well, that's not who Jesus is to me. Maybe it would be better if we learned who Jesus was to him. And then we might really know the guy in the Bible. Right? Because our goal is to know him more and more and more. What if you found out that there was somebody that you knew, all right, from reading about or whatever, and then you found out that most of what you read about this individual is incorrect? Would it bother you? Okay? Would you want to go on, or would it be easier to go, nah, I like the one that was invented? Okay? Because that's the day that we live in. The day that we live in is we are making decisions in our life. You are here because you've done that. You said, you know what? I want to know more. I want to know more about the Jesus in the Bible, not the one that has been created by men and their traditions. So that's what they're doing. So who is he to you? Who is he to you? So we'll pick this up again next week. Now that you have the background, that means everybody here has got to be here next week. And when you get ready to bring your neighbor or whoever it is that you're bringing, you need to give them the background. Don't just be lazy and tell them to go online. You can do that, all right? But it'd be better if you just gave them the background, what you learned tonight. Which might be something good with the mic that Gail has if you're going to ask any questions, as I would ask, did you learn anything tonight? So, or what else? Questions. John. We need that mic. The handheld. Go ahead.
Does it work? Does it work?
Yep.
I have the lights on. Can you hear me? I don't think so. Oh, there it
is.
is.
There it is. Got it.
Yeah, the answer to your question, yes, I think I learned some things. But what I'm excited about is what you were doing is you were putting words to things that I've kind of seen all around me. It's just part of the background. And now I feel like you're bringing definition to a lot of things, which to me helps immensely. It suggests to me that what I'm hearing, and I'd like to say in my spirit, maybe not understanding upstairs here, but that's valid, because now you're explaining why it's all there and why it all works. Anyway, that's your question.
Good.
But what I wanted to to talk about is you've emphasized that rabbis use questions with their Talmudim and anyone else to teach. So as you're talking about Yeshua saying, who do these people say that I am?
Yeah.
I would think that the Talmudim should be practiced enough by now to think not what's the right answer, but rather why is he asking the question?
There you go.
So to me, if a Talmudim is not learning how to answer a question with a question, he runs a very strong risk of missing the point.
Second graders.
Yeah. Well, I tend to be Greco-Roman too.
We all do.
I want the right answer. You know, I want to be right. I don't want to be wrong.
Right.
But when he's asking a question like that, it really is a leading question to try to get them to think, and that's exactly what they did. They said, well, they say this, but what do you say that I am? And I'm thinking, he jumped to an answer which sounded great, but I'm just thinking that there's behind the scenes, in the back of their minds, there really should be growing an awareness of why is he asking this question, which is more than a pop quiz. Am I going to get it right?
You're right, and they don't. That's it. See, when we read this, we're like, it's like when you read the Tanakh. You're like, what are you guys, idiots? How, you know, it's obvious over and over and over again. You do this, you do this, you do this, and this happens. Every time you do it, why do you keep doing it, you know? It's like, it's easy to look at it and judge it Romanly, I guess. But, you know, I guess if I would have been there and I was as learned as I would have liked to have been, when he asked, who are people saying that I am? And then who do you say that I am? I would have said, who do you want me to say that you are? Question mark. But anyway, okay, go ahead.
Well, you left us on a little cliffhanger with Peter. What we noticed, what he didn't say also, he didn't say you're the Messiah that came to die for our sins and free us forever. We can just say,
Correct.
we can
Right.
do whatever we want. We just have grace.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't want to steal away from your thunder, which you might be teaching next week, but I guess
Go ahead.
my question would be, was the Torah not explicitly clear that there would be a Messiah that would perform some kind of things later in what we'll read in Matthew with respect to what his purpose was on the cross? Because he didn't mention any of that.
If you are, okay, this is James and your questions. You always ask excellent questions, and that is one, okay? If you are a Jew living in Yeshua's day, you do not know that Isaiah 53 is about an individual. You believe it's about you, Israel. Okay? And they believe that even today. Okay? So what happened and what happens in the writings in the New Testament, all right, what happens in those writings is they go back and they look at these prophecies and they go, oh, now I get it. Remember at the end of Luke? At the end of Luke, you have these disciples that are walking away from Jerusalem. They're like done. They're devastated. He died. We don't know what we're going to do. And then he shows up right by them. Okay? If they were his disciples, that means they were guys that were with him the whole way. Okay? And now they're leaving, and he comes up, and he's playing with them a little bit like, hey, guys, where are you going? Well, we're leaving. Why? Well, didn't you hear what happened? There was this guy, and we thought he was the one, and he's dead, and yada, yada. And he was like, did you read the Tanakh? And they know the Tanakh. And it says right then, he opened their eyes in order that they would understand. So they didn't. Peter didn't. None of them did. That they didn't get it. So, yes, there you go. Good.
So
question.
I have a question. Actually, 3 questions.
You only get one.
When did the Nephilim die out? Were there Nephilim when Yeshua was on earth, and are there Nephilim today?
I have one answer to all of those questions. It's a rabbi question, an answer. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Okay, look, in Revelation, you get the idea that if they're not gone, they're coming back. Or they're still here. Sometimes we use the word demon. There's not a word demon in the Torah. There's no word demon. So what's a demon? A demon is a spirit being that is in rebellion against Yehovah. So how long has that been going on? Well, maybe it's been going on even before the beginning, if you catch what I mean. So, good question. One more. Is there any? Kathy?
Actually, two, but with the Nephilim, it was in the blood somehow of maybe the daughters that married into Noah's family or something, because they kept coming. And yes, I do believe that there is still some of that genetics in and around today from what I've seen in nursing. Okay, so you said this is not what Peter believed, even though he said that.
No.
And
I said
what did you say?
what he believed about who the Messiah is and what the Messiah was going to do is not what Yeshua was here to do. So
Okay.
his beliefs were about what Messiah in that office would do, and that's not what happened.
So I know you're going to tell us next week, but the very next verse, Yeshua is saying, "Blessed are you, Simon," that because God revealed this to him. So that's
And then what are his words like 4 verses later?
Oh, I have to look.
Get behind me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. No, need the mic so you can be online.
So was the Nephilim slipped in with the Erev Rav when they came from Egypt? That's what I've heard something about that.
I don't know. Erev Ra. Ra is
Erev Rav.
Ra is the god, right?
It was a group that was with the Egyptians, and they split
yeah,
off.
mixed multitude.
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe.
I've seen stuff about that. I was just
yeah,
gonna yeah.
that's an interesting idea. It's like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. But listen, where we're going, just to wet, if your appetite is not already whetted, where we're going is we're going to the mountain of transfiguration that was not about or even for Peter, James, and John. They just happened to be there to help. But that was not what that was about. Okay? We get the idea that that mountain was about Yeshua going, and Peter, James, and John going, oh, and that's what we should do. Maybe that is what you should do, but that isn't what that was about. So that was about being on Mount Hermon. If you ever watched the movie Braveheart, it was about picking a fight. Remember? They asked him, William Wallace, what are you doing? He goes, I'm going to pick a fight. Okay, well, thanks very much. It's getting late. I'll let you guys go. Let's stand up together. There's a lot going on. If you know any boys around, tomorrow, Trail Life here at 4. If it's not raining and it dries off a little bit, we'll be in the back lot back there with a fire. Otherwise, we'll be in here with no fire. I looked at the weather, and the weather was a 0% chance of it not raining tomorrow. And I was like, dang, that's bad. Anyway, Yehovah, your Elohim, will bless you and keep you. Yehovah will make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. Yehovah will look you in the eyes and give you his shalom. And in Hebrew, it sounds like this. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'mishmerecha Ya'er Yehovah panav elecha v'yikuneka Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Shabbat shalom. And go home and read your Bibles, and we'll have ministry team down here if you need prayer.